Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Weekly Waypoint, the show where I talk about my week and the things that interest me, such as Motor Mayhem, the game you are seeing on screen right now. Thank you for clicking this video, because we're doing another round of the games I grew up with, because I've got PS2 recording up and running, baby! And last time I did this, I tanked whatever small amount of views I normally get on A Weekly Waypoint, because people saw a game that they don't recognise, and so they just didn't click it, which I can't fault, because I'll be honest, I do that with other creators, but damn it, I want to include these videos and show you them. One of the reasons I was so excited to get this up and running was that, you know, I never see games like Motor Mayhem mentioned anywhere. They're not part of the cultural zeitgeist of gaming. They're like a 6 out of 10 on Metacritic or whatever, even though I have a lot of fun playing them, and I think you might agree, they look pretty cool too. And it was a major part of my childhood. I've probably sunk 40-50 hours into this game over the years, which, you know, isn't crazy by like MMO standards or whatever, but it's just like a repeatable brain dead shoot 'em up vehicular combat game. I think that's pretty decent, and by the way, that's a total estimate based on memory. It could be a lot less, it could be a lot more, I don't really know. All I know is I love this game and I'm so excited to have been able to get it up and running. Let's talk about that a little bit, because eagle-eyed viewers and anyone who actually cares to investigate, so I might as well not hide it, will notice that yes, I'm running this on an emulator, of course providing all my own ISOs, because them's the laws, baby. But I've tried to set up a PS2 emulator before and I've had trouble, because the game I've always tried to run as part of that is Ratchet and Clank, and the thing you need to understand when you're setting up a PlayStation 2 emulator, at least if you're using the same setup I am with like a 960 and only 2GB of VRAM. I don't know if that's an issue, but that's the biggest bottleneck on my performance that I can tell on my PC. So if you're using specs like mine, the biggest thing you need to be aware of is that you're not going to be able to run every PS2 game, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to run lots of PS2 games. I held off doing it because I was like, well, if I can't run Ratchet & Clank, then what's the point? But actually, as it turns out, Ratchet & Clank is one of the harder games to emulate because of the way it was built. And there are other games like this as well. I've had trouble with Test Drive Unlimited, Need for Speed Most Wanted, Unreal Tournament, which I technically could get up and running and wanted to show off as like a fun, hey, Unreal Tournament shows up on here quite a lot. Here's the PS2 version because it has its own maps and a few discrepancies. But to do that, if I want to run it, it's only at like 15 frames a second it'll run, and also every time I have to go in and manually change something in the emulator's INI files. And I thought, it's not really worth it, is it? But what I have been doing is playing games like Motor Mayhem, Motor Siege Warriors of Primetime, Fur Fighters Vigo's Revenge, which you can find videos of on this very channel. I've been playing Need for Speed Underground, and Need for Speed Underground 2 I've checked as well, runs pretty decently. Played some Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Unfortunately, Tony Hawk's Underground does seem to suffer from some slowdown. I'm just like listing every ISO I've been playing now. I've also been playing some Road Trip Adventure, which is really exciting. I can't wait to make some content around that. There's also RC Revenge Pro, which will probably show up in a Weekly Waypoint sooner or later, which is the PS2 version of the RC Revenge game, which has been on a Weekly Waypoint before. Messed around in Smuggler's Run, and Burnout Free Takedown is a fun one because the sky is missing. It's just a black texture in the sky, and there is a fix for it, but it's not really that big of a deal, I don't think. And yeah, I've recently had a week off, and that's pretty much what I've spent my week doing, just going back and playing these old PS2 games and having an absolutely delightful time of it. I've played old PS2 games before on the actual console, you know, in the years since the PS2 stopped being the main console I played, but this is definitely the most fun I've had with it since the PS3 came out. There's something about emulating when you're able to do it properly, which is just so much more rewarding, because it's just like easy to run from your PC. You know, you've still got everything on your PC alt tabs in the background, so it's not like you're just sitting off in a corner somewhere playing your old console completely cut off from the world. And of course you've got the benefits of upscaling. This is 1080p upscales, which might be why some of the textures are funky. I still need to mess around with that, but I decided not to change the aspect ratio because it just makes everything look a little bit wider than it should be. Of course I've already enjoyed PlayStation 1 emulation and Nintendo DS and Game Boy Advance emulation, and it's really becoming like a pet project of mine now, building up my library of games and just having them on my PC able to record and share and play, and just, it's lovely. If you ever get the chance, you know, it's a fun project to pursue. I'm not just playing Motor Mayhem here for the Weekly Waypoint. I actually spent hours the other day just playing through the campaign, and I've been doing that with other games as well, like RC Revenge Pro. I've been just playing through it, and it's, you know, it's just because I haven't played these games in so many years, it's just quite fresh, I think. But also some of them have aged better than I expected. Obviously the 1080p upscaling helps with that. But honestly, if I change this back to the PS2 original native resolution, it doesn't look that different. It just looks, you know, a little bit less clear. And as much as I used to be like, oh, if I can't get Ratchet & Clank working, then I'm not going to bother with it because it just stresses me out and annoys me because I can't play the game I want to play. Now that I've changed my attitude, it's actually fun tinkering with the emulation, seeing like, how's this game going to run? Oh, this game's not running very well. I'm going to have to, you know, tweak with it and see if I can get it to run and like investigate the issues behind it. It's actually quite fun, and I think that's the attitude you need to have if you're pursuing emulation. Also, some fun things playing these old games is like looking up some of the things like, oh, how do I do this again, or like, can I get a cheat code for this? The other day I lost my RC Revenge Pro save progress, and for a second I was like, fuck, I forgot to save, and now I'm gonna have to do it all again. And then I remembered, wait, this is the year 2000, I can literally just look up cheat codes to progress. We haven't invented microtransactions yet. Players have the freedom to do what they want in games. But in looking up some of that stuff, I learned things like there are secret levels in Motor Mayhem, which I don't think I ever unlocked, so I'm going to be working towards that, which can be quite fun. And then there's also some fun moments where I'm like, oh, Test Drive Unlimited really does not want to work. Is there anything online that can help with this? And I look it up and people are like, you know, there is a PC version of Test Drive Unlimited, just get that. I'm like, oh right, yeah. But yeah, as you can see, there was a pretty big texture glitch there. And speaking of glitches in video games that aren't very well optimized for the system they are running on, I just got Pokemon Violet. I did want to get it when it first launched, but I did not have Timoni. So I did the grown-up thing, and I did some overtime shifts, and now I have Timoni and I have to game. And I'm only a couple of hours in so far. For reference, I have beaten the first gym, but I also spent quite a decent amount of time just leisurely strolling between objectives and catching all the Pokemon I could see. And I've been very vocal on Twitter about how the presentation of Pokemon Violet is very disappointing to me. Like, I've been watching videos about how it runs, and yeah, it's pretty bad. There is a little bit of bias there in that I'm always seeing the absolute worst examples of glitches and memory leak issues making the frame rate bad. It's not actually as bad all the time as people make it out to be, but it's certainly sore on the eyes. But of course, the thing which I didn't really listen to much because of all of this is people saying that despite all of these issues, it's a really fucking good Pokemon game. And again, I'm only a couple of hours in, so that's not me saying that just yet, but it has made a really strong first impression on me. I mean, first of all, the whole open world thing is nice. I really enjoyed it in Legends Arceus, of course, but this is even more open world than that game was, because that game was divided into zones. But just like it just feels like a natural evolution of a Pokemon formula, I guess, is what I'm saying. I've still got some questions about how levels work. How, like, is there level scaling out in the open world? I haven't really come across a zone where there's been Pokemons of like a much higher level than me there. And I do wonder at endgame, like, is it gonna be a bit like it was in Sword and Shield, where like the earlier levels of the wild area was just like super low level Pokemon that you shouldn't go out of your way to bother with. But as long as they have a decently sized endgame area, I guess it's not really a big deal, right? But the thing that's really been grabbing me so far about Pokemon Violet is just like the general iteration you get in a new Pokemon generation. So for instance, like, you now have a button to automatically heal your Pokemon that are injured with various potions and berries as effectively as possible, and that's something that's been done in other JRPGs in modern times, but it's lovely to see implemented in Pokemon. Also, I really like the user interface in this game. It's really clean, and also, like, there's this new animation for when you capture a new Pokemon and put it in your Pokedex. It puts it in like this little kind of book folder thing and slots it on a shelf next to others. And it's so fucking satisfying that the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I'm perfecting this game. I think it took a leaf out of Pokemon Legends Arceus' book in the fact that they were like, hey, the Pokedex is kind of a big deal, and, you know, I'm not saying they don't put effort into it in previous games, but they definitely incentivize filling it out more with stuff like this. If anyone's wondering, I went with Fuecoco because normally I just choose the grass type. Not no matter what I feel about it, but like, I'm definitely more inclined to choose the grass type. Last time though, I chose Grookey, and I'm not really a monkey guy. I was just like, well, Grookey, he's the grass type, and he's kind of cool, I guess. And I was happy with Rillaboom in the end. But this time I'm just like, well, why would I choose a starter that's against the starter I really want? So instead I listened to my heart and I chose Fuecoco, and I think he's one level off of evolving, so I'm excited to see what he turns out to be. I'm not setting any nicknames for Pokemon. I think this is going to be my way of doing it going forwards in new generations. I'm not setting any nicknames because I want to know what their actual names are, and also I don't know what they're going to evolve into, so I will set their nicknames when they, when they're more familiar to me. I also really love that they've continued some of the strongest elements of Pokemon Sword and Shield, in that they have these, they're not called max raid battles anymore, I think they're probably called Terra raid battles, but they have these lairs where you can go and take on a Pokemon boss fight. I still don't know all the ins and outs of Terra styling or terrestrialization or whatever it's called, so I can't really speak too much about that specifically. But I do love that that type of gameplay has come back, and I'm also very grateful that the AI companions are actually fucking useful this time, because they were dog shit in Sword and Shield, and I don't currently have a Nintendo Switch Online subscription. But yeah, I think that's brilliant end game gameplay, and I'm so happy to see it back. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about today is Spider-Man 2099, because people may remember that the last time I was super into reading comics before I got into DC Comics, I was reading that series, and recently in the last few days I've decided to go back and continue reading it, and it's really good. I am of course talking about the original 90s comic run where the character was first introduced, and sadly, in a very rare limited moment for Marvel Unlimited, they do not have the last 8 comics in that run, so I don't quite know how it ends. But I've looked up some general stuff about the 2099 universe, and it seems like I'm not really going to get any more 2099 until like 2013, which is a massive shame, because for those of you who don't know, what I've been doing is reading through comicbookreadingorders.com, their reading order of Spider-Man, and it recommended going and reading Spider-Man 2099, which was something that was quite exciting for me because I've always really loved the concept of that character, and to hear that I'm not really going to be seeing that character again for quite a long time, obviously not 20 years, because I read those comics at a faster pace than they were released, I guess, but for a long time, it's going to be a little sad, so I'm looking forward to the next time I get to see that character. But it's really exciting. I'm glad he's going to be getting some time in the next Spider-Verse movie, at least I think he is. I haven't looked too much into that, but he was teased. And in the meantime, I'm back to 1993 Spider-Man comics, and there's a Green Goblin run in 1993, not run, but like a story, and it was really good. I really liked it, and now the same person who wrote that they also wrote Spider-Man The Lost Years, which is the first thing that's recommended to read for the second Clone Saga, which I've heard some bad things about. But this whole Lost Years arc, it's like 6 issues long. It's really good. I'm not going to give away what happens. There's a pretty major twist, and I'm wondering if this is why people say the second Clone Saga sucks, because they just think it's a really dumb twist or whatever. But I've kind of expected it because I've heard rumblings about it already. So I'm enjoying it so far. I will keep you updated if it does turn into doggy poo-poo. Also in between those two stories was Maximum Carnage, and I did a new thing where even though the reading order recommended me reading it, I found myself getting bored of it, so I just looked up a synopsis of it and then read the last issue, and I think that's what I'm going to do for stuff like that going forward, because otherwise I think I will fall off of comic runs like I've done in the past. But yeah, back to reading comics, I guess. I never really meant to stop, but that's how my brain works. Also, one last thing before we go, I've unsubscribed from World of Warcraft because I'm having a bit of an identity crisis about it, because everyone loves the endgame of this expansion, but I'm just like, I really enjoyed the leveling, don't get me wrong. I think it's a really strong first patch for an expansion, at least in terms of like your leveling experience, but I just felt like there was nothing to do, and I know that's not true, because there was like stuff to do. You just had to grind rep to get to it. Like, if you wanted to continue the story, you had to grind renown, and it didn't even tell you what renown level you had to grind to continue the story. Like, there are main story chapters at different renown levels, don't get me wrong, but also like the actual proper main campaign, it just said, oh, get more renown to continue the story, and I just didn't enjoy grinding the renown. and I've just, as good as everyone is saying this expansion is, I've just kind of cancelled my subscription. So I've never cancelled a subscription that early into an expansion, by the way. And this isn't me saying it's bad. This is just me saying it fundamentally lost me. But who knows? Maybe that's just the mood I'm in. I'm gonna go finish this new Pokemon game, and then I think I'm gonna go and resubscribe to Final Fantasy XIV, because this time last year I was proper into it. So I think that's probably why I'm really feeling the itch to go back and play some more Final Fantasy XIV again. I really need to get those videos out of me playing through the main campaign. But that's going to do it for this episode of A Weekly Waypoint. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.